The night I got the lead role in the school play, I came home with the biggest smile of my life. I was 17 years old. I had worked for 3 years to earn that moment. And within 48 hours, I couldn't use my hands. Not because of an accident. Not because of bad luck. Because of my sister. And when I showed my parents my burned, blistered palms and told them what she did, my mother looked at me, sighed, and said, "Kimball, she's just jealous. She'll get over it." That was it. No doctor, no apology demanded, no consequences. And in that moment, something inside me went very, very quiet. Not broken, not defeated. Quiet. Because I had just learned something about my family that I would never unlearn. And I decided, right there, with bandaged hands and a heart full of ash, that I would never scream about what happened to me. I would document it. If you have ever been the family member everyone dismisses, the one told to just move on, to keep the peace, to stop being so sensitive, stay with me. Because this story doesn't end with me crying in a corner. It ends with the system doing what my parents refused to do. And my sister never saw it coming. Before I go any further, if this already feels familiar to you, if you've ever been the one in your family who got hurt and then got blamed for making it awkward, please subscribe. Your support means everything, and it reminds me I'm not alone in this. Now let me tell you everything. My name is Kimball. I'm 30 years old now. I live in Boston. But 13 years ago, I was a 17-year-old kid in a small suburb outside the city, standing in the hallway of our family home, holding a piece of paper that said, "Lead role Kimball" in bold black ink. I remember the way the afternoon light came through the kitchen window. I remember the smell of whatever my mother, Samantha, was cooking. I remember the sound of the television in the living room where my father, Donald, was half asleep in his chair. I remember my sister, Alicia, sitting at the kitchen table. She was 19, 2 years older than me, and for as long as I could remember, she had been the performer in the family, the one who took dance classes, the one who did community theater, the one whose bedroom wall was covered in playbills and photographs and dreams she'd announced loudly enough for all of us to hear. I had never competed with her. That was never my intention. But that afternoon, I walked into the kitchen and told my family I had gotten the lead. My mother squealed and hugged me. My father said, "That's my boy," without looking up from the television. And Alicia smiled. It was the kind of smile that didn't reach her eyes, the kind that sits on a person's face the way a mask sits, perfectly in place, telling you nothing about what's underneath. I went to bed that night feeling like the world was finally, genuinely mine. I woke up the next morning to the smell of something burning. I assumed it was toast. It wasn't toast. What happened next? I'm going to tell you calmly because I've had 13 years to process it, and because the way I tell this story matters. Alicia had come into my room early in the morning while I was still half asleep. I had my script on the nightstand, my hands were resting on top of the blanket. She had boiling water. Whether it was intentional or whether she convinced herself it was an accident, I will let you decide. But the result was the same. I woke up screaming. My hands, both of them, were burned. Not catastrophically. Not in a way that required surgery. But badly enough that the skin blistered. Badly enough that for weeks I could barely hold a pencil. Badly enough that I lost the lead role because I couldn't perform the physical demands of the part. I told my parents exactly what happened. My father, Donald, looked deeply uncomfortable and said nothing. My mother, Samantha, rubbed my back and said, "Kimball, she's just jealous. She'll get over it. Let's not make this a bigger thing than it needs to be." There was no confrontation with Alicia that I witnessed. There was no apology. There was a family dinner 2 nights later where everyone ate pasta and talked about something on the news. And I sat there with bandaged hands, watching my family collectively decide that what happened to me was inconvenient. Not wrong. Not unacceptable. Inconvenient. That was the moment the quiet settled in me. I want to be honest with you about something. I did not have a plan, not at 17, not immediately. What I had was a composition notebook and a habit my school counselor, a kind woman named Mrs. Medina Fernandez, had given me years earlier. She had told me once, "Kimball, when life feels out of control, write things down. Dates, times, exactly what was said. It helps you process, and sometimes it protects you." ADAE. I don't think she meant it as legal advice, but that's essentially what it became. I started writing everything down. Every incident, every dismissal, every time Alicia did something that crossed a line, and my parents shrugged it off. The burned hands were the most dramatic, but they were not isolated. There was the time she told my college counselor, a man named Mr. Tate Davidson, that I had a substance problem, a complete lie that delayed my application process by nearly 2 months. There was the time she told my then-girlfriend Holly things about me that were so distorted and so poisonous that Holly stopped taking my calls for 3 weeks. There was the time she showed up to a job interview I had at a firm where her friend worked. I still don't know exactly what she said, but I didn't get the job. Each time when I brought it to my parents, the response was some variation of the same sentence. "Kimball, she doesn't mean it, she loves you, she's just struggling." My father Donald's version was silence. My mother Samantha's version was sympathy for Alicia. And every time I wrote it down, date, time, what happened, what was said, who witnessed it. By the time I was 23, I had 3 composition notebooks full. I also had a name. A good friend named Marcus Egan, who had gone to law school and specialized in exactly the kinds of civil disputes that most families try to keep out of courtrooms. I called him one evening in November. I told him I needed to know if what I had in those notebooks was worth anything. He was quiet for a long time after I finished talking. Then he said, "Kimball, this isn't a journal, this is a paper trail." I want to stop here for just a second, because if you're watching this and you're in a family where you've been gaslit, minimized, or told your pain is an overreaction, I see you. Please subscribe. Your support means everything, and it reminds me I'm not alone in this. I promise you, this story is going somewhere. Stay with me. For several years, I kept my distance from Alicia. I moved to Boston, built a career in marketing, and tried to simply live my life away from the damage. I had a good circle. My friend group included people like Jimmy Tariq, who always kept me grounded, and my colleague Alex Benjamin, who became one of the most steadying presences in my adult life. I was doing well. And then I met Erickson. Erickson Franklin was everything I hadn't known I needed. He was steady, funny, perceptive, and patient. He came from a family that communicated openly, that apologized when they were wrong, that didn't treat accountability as a threat. Being loved by him taught me things about myself I hadn't understood before. He also had a business. A small but growing event management company he'd spent 5 years building from nothing. He was proud of it. His business partner was a man named Peter Tate, and together they had built something real. About 2 years into our relationship, Alicia came back into my orbit. My mother had been ill, nothing life-threatening, but enough to bring the family back into the same rooms. And Alicia, who had charmed her way into a social media career by this point, was everywhere in those rooms. Warm, funny, apparently reformed. I was cautious. Erickson told me to trust my instincts. My instincts were right. Alicia, during a family gathering, spent time with Erickson. She was charming. She asked thoughtful questions about his business. She seemed genuinely interested. 3 months later, Erickson received an anonymous complaint to the city's business licensing board. The complaint alleged financial irregularities in his company's handling of client payments. It was detailed, it was specific, and it was fabricated. But fabricated complaints still trigger investigations, and investigations cost time, money, and reputation. Erickson was blindsided. Peter was furious. The business nearly collapsed under the weight of legal fees alone before the investigation concluded that there was no basis for the complaint. I knew. The moment I heard the details of the complaint, the specific language, the specific accusations, I knew. I called Marcus. Marcus Egan is not a dramatic man. He doesn't raise his voice. He doesn't make promises he can't keep. When I sat across from him in his office and spread my 3 composition notebooks on his desk alongside the documentation from Erickson's investigation, he read everything methodically, without expression. When he finished, he looked at me and said, "You've been building this case for 7 years without realizing it." We identified 4 actionable areas. The false substance abuse report to my college counselor, which had been documented by Mr. Davidson and had materially impacted my academic timeline. The job interference, a pattern of deliberate defamation toward me and those connected to me. And the business complaint, which, with the help of a digital forensics contact Marcus knew, a careful woman named Samantha Cole, who found metadata trails most people don't know exist, was traced back to an account connected to Alicia. I won't walk you through every legal detail, but I will tell you this. We did not go to my parents first. We did not give Alicia a warning. We did not ask her to apologize or make amends. We filed. The first person to call me after the paperwork was served was my father, Donald. He didn't ask if I was okay. He didn't ask what had happened. He said, "Kimball, why are you doing this to our family?" I want to tell you that I had a beautiful, perfectly scripted response ready. But the truth is, I said something very simple. I said, "Dad, she burned my hands, and you told me she was just jealous." He was quiet. I have 3 notebooks, Dad, 7 years of being just jealous. He didn't respond to that. My mother Samantha called an hour later. She was crying. She told me I was tearing the family apart. She told me that Alicia was going through so much. She told me that this wasn't who we were as a family. I told her very gently that she had defined who we were as a family the morning she bandaged my hands and made pasta for dinner 2 nights later. She cried harder. I told her I loved her, and I hung up. The civil case settled out of court. The terms are confidential, but I will tell you that what Erickson's business lost in legal fees and lost contracts during the investigation period was addressed. I will tell you that there was an official record, now permanent, of the complaint being traced back to its source. I will tell you that Alicia's social media brand, which had been growing and which represented her livelihood, took a significant hit when the settlement became known in the circles she moved in. Not because I publicized it, because settlements of that nature tend to have a way of being known. I will also tell you that my friend Tommy Erickson, a mutual friend who had been caught in the middle of the family dynamics for years, called me the week after the settlement and said, "Man, I didn't know it was that bad. I should have said something sooner." I told him it was okay, because it was. Because the point was never to punish everyone who had been a bystander. The point was to stop the bleeding. I am 30 years old. I live in Boston with Erickson, who still runs his business. Stronger now than it was before, because near loss has a way of clarifying what matters. My father Donald and I speak occasionally. It is not the relationship I once wanted with him, but it is honest in a way it was never honest before. He acknowledged, once, quietly over the phone, that he should have done more when I was 17. He didn't elaborate. I didn't push. Sometimes that's what healing looks like. Not a grand reckoning, but a small, insufficient admission that nonetheless costs a man something to make. My mother Samantha and I are closer than I expected. She has been in therapy. She has said things to me that I never expected to hear from her. She is working on understanding what it means to protect one child by sacrificing another. It is slow, it is imperfect, but it is real. Alicia and I do not speak. That is not a wound. That is a boundary. There is a difference, and I spent a long time learning it. My hands, by the way, healed completely. You would never know, looking at them now, what they looked like 13 years ago. But I know. And that knowledge, not as pain, but as memory, as evidence, as proof that I survived something that was meant to diminish me, that knowledge is one of the most important things I carry. I think about Mrs. Medina Fernandez sometimes, my school counselor who told me to write things down. I wonder if she knows what that advice became. I wonder if she knows that it turned a 17-year-old boy's grief into something that could stand up in a room and be taken seriously. I think about the night I got the lead role. That piece of paper that said lead role, Kimball. I never got to perform that part. But I performed something harder, over 13 years. The slow, quiet, unglamorous work of not becoming bitter while still refusing to become a doormat. That is the role I am most proud of. If you watched this entire video, thank you. I mean that with everything in me. You didn't have to stay, but you did. And if any part of this story lived somewhere inside your own experience, if you've ever been the one in your family who was hurt and then told to carry it quietly, I want you to know that your pain was real. Your documentation matters. Your patience is not weakness. And the system, slow and imperfect as it is, can sometimes do what the people who were supposed to protect you refuse to do. Please subscribe. Your support means everything, and it reminds me I'm not alone in this. And if this story moved you, share it with someone who needs to hear it, not for revenge, not for drama. For the 17-year-old version of someone out there who is sitting at a dinner table with bandaged hands, wondering if anyone will ever take them seriously. They will. Give them this. I'll see you in the next one.